To catch up with all your old friends and new friends too. We're ready to get started on our evening's program. We've got a number of friends of Phil's that would like to say a few words about him. And I'd like to invite the first of these, Dr. Gary Vliet of our department. He's an Emeritus Professor of Mechanical Engineering. I want to read a little bit about Gary here. Dr. Vliet's general areas of research are heat and mass transfer and solar energy systems. Gary is an emeritus member of our faculty. He used to be a part of the thermal fluids group, the same as Phil and the same as me for that matter. He had served on our faculty since 1971 with 10 years of industrial experience prior to coming to UT Austin. He's published more than 60 technical articles and reports and edited 2 books. And he retired from mechanical engineering in 2006, so he's an old friend of Phil's. Gary, where are you? Oh, all right, come on, one.
Well, I think the gathering here tonight is speaks for itself in terms of how people feel about Phil in many respects, and I appreciate being asked to say a few words. By the way, I think this might go on longer than you think. Not just me, but I was feeling there'll be some. It was actually through Phil that I joined UT in mechanical engineering in 1971. And I'm going to do about 3 things. I'm going to tell a few stories. I'm going to talk a little bit about Phil and his educational award. Not much about that because I'm sure other people are going to say that about. They know that about him, and also some personal things between the Schmidt family and our family. The first story I want to say is that Phil graduated from Stanford in I think 1968, and he decided that he would go to instead of going to a university like UT Austin. Right away, he would devote a couple of years to teaching at Prairie View A&M. And so he came to UT and had an interview. And I was not here at the time, so I'm just telling you what I heard. But anyway, he came here and had an interview, and they were very interested, of course, and it was pretty obvious they wanted to make an offer. But he said, well, it's really on a condition that I can spend 2 years at Prairie View. And apparently, after that interview, I'm not going to mention the name, but one of the faculty members at the time warned him that he thought that would be a bad decision. It would probably be held against him and, would jeopardize his career. But he went ahead, of course, and went to Prairie View A&M. While he was there, apparently the situation was pretty drastic at the lab. He actually called up John Mech, who at that time was the dean here, and explained to John the situation of their labs. And this may have been illegal, John, but you helped out a lot. And I think even to the point of sending a technician down there and bringing back instruments and having them repaired here at the university so that they could have them at Prairie View A&M. So my interview was in 1971. And being from the San Francisco Bay Area and having a lot of water, the Bay Area and Pacific Ocean and everything, apparently for some reason when we came, Donna and Phil thought they ought to show me that Texas wasn't all cactus and sagebrush. So they took me out to Lake Travis. And Donna, if you have that little thing, you could give it to Donna and Phil. So we went out to Lake Travis. You can open it, Phil. And I will just wait. If you open it quickly, just rip it off. Use one of your grandkids to rip it off. Anyway, what it is, it's a picture of the svelte Phil and the attractive Donna Schmidt with the Lake Travis in the background. And so this was during my interview, and this was actually his first year at University of Texas in 1971. So that was, whatever it was, 40-some years ago. Okay. So just a couple stories. One of them was I was here for maybe 3 or 4 days, and Lynn Draper, who was sitting back there somewhere, and Phil, Lynn was in the department in mechanical at the time, and Lynn was in mechanical in the nuclear area at the time, and Phil asked me if I wanted to go out to lunch at the Shanty. I don't know if anybody remembers the Shanty, but the Shanty was a sort of interesting restaurant down on the banks of Waller Creek where the convention center is. And I said, oh, that'd be fine. So we go down, we drive down, and on the way, Phil says to me, now this fellow that runs this place is a real curmudgeon, and he says if you don't have your order ready right away, he'll really chew you out. You know, so I said, that's okay. So I just followed them through the line, and they ordered, and they got to me, and I said, yeah, okay, I'll have a 1/4 pound of beef and a 1/4 pound of sausage, and they cut it off and slapped it on some butcher paper and handed it to me, and this fellow says to me, he said, what do you want to drink? And I said, I'll have a Coors. And the fellow, this big 6'3" or so fellow with a sort of a dirty apron and a good-sized belly, looked down at me and says, Sonny, you're in Texas now. It turns out Coors hadn't come to Austin yet. I think it was it was in San Angelo, but not in Austin. The other thing is, if you go out to the posse in our building and you try to fight your way down the hall to get out the back door, there's all this surplus equipment, furniture and stuff. And I was amused because I was saying if this was in the 1970s, Phil Schmidt would have this all requisitioned and in his lab by now. So that would be an easy way to get rid of it. One of the things he would do is back then there used to be these government surplus reports that would come out every monthly or something. I don't know, they'd come out monthly or something. And as soon as they got them, Phil would pore over these things, and then a few weeks later, showing up on the department floor would be an engine or a compressor or some pumps or recorders, and they got an awful lot of stuff that way. But beyond that, he was working on a project out at Lake LBJ at the time on water temperature because there was a new power plant going in, and so he needed a boat to do these samplings, and it turns out he saw two lifeboats. I think they were lifeboats, right, Phil? World War I built lifeboats, and he requisitioned these 2 lifeboats. Apparently, one was in fair condition but still had to be patched up and get much. The other one was almost beyond condition. But anyway, they used those up in Lake LBJ. That's one of the interesting part of it. The other interesting thing was that they were storing these out at balconies in the interim between tests. And apparently, being out on Lake LBJ in the hot summer is a little boring, and so you have to drink a little at times. And so apparently these boats, somebody noticed that they had some beer cans in the boats that were back in balconies. And so Dr. Gloina, yeah, he was here earlier. Yeah, Dr. Gloina called Phil in and sort of reprimanded him over on the imbibing under university rules. Anyway, so thank you, Dr. Gloina, for keeping track of him, okay? Let's see. The other one is late 70s. We got a grant from National Science Foundation on liquid metals, and I'm a little amused now about when new faculty come, they get this $200,000 or $300,000 in money, and they get a nice lab and all that business. And so we got this grant, but we were in Taylor Hall. There was no air-conditioned space except for one classroom, which was Taylor Hall 138. And so, we talked to Dr. Lamb, who's back here somewhere, who was the chairman at the time. He said, well, you can have that caged-in room over in the northeast corner of Taylor Hall. So that was fine. But he says, I don't have any money for air conditioning, So this is another little questionable thing, but we got the shop to wall it in and put in some insulation. I think you and I actually helped them do that, Phil. And also put in a window air conditioner, partially at NSF's expense. But that was not, how long ago is it's beyond being, it's late enough now. So, anyway, Also, in late 70s, there was a large interest in energy efficiency. The Arab oil embargo had come several years before, and there was a question about energy. And so Phil, largely at Phil's instance, his urging, I guess, or organization, Phil, myself, Lynn Draper, who's here, and Milt Williams, who was here, he wasn't a faculty member, and Jerry Jones, and I'm missing somebody. Oh, Jack Howell. And graduate student Mike Hart formed a company called Energy Engineering Associates, EEA, and it ended up doing really rather well. But then after a couple of years, there were some questions about conflict of interest, and so we stepped out of it. But Mike Hart continued that. He was here earlier tonight, but had to leave. Mike Hart stayed on, and the company now has between 50 or 60 employees and has a $8 or $10 million annual revenue and is doing very well. So Phil was largely responsible for instigating that.
Things always do well after we get out.
Well, I didn't want to emphasize that, but Phil says things always do better after you get out of them. So as far as education and his teaching, I think there's a lot of students who are going to come up and will tell you firsthand examples of how good a teacher he is. But we all know that. For example, you saw the awards outside. One of them was the Carnegie Award, which was several years ago, which they give out. The Carnegie Foundation gives out, I think, 50 awards each year, one to each state. These are not just for engineering. These are an award for each state. And Phil was one of the awardees. He was the awardee for Texas, and that's over all disciplines. Pretty impressive. The other thing, I think he was selected as maybe the first distinguished faculty member for the UT Distinguished Teachers Award. And there's a number of other things you might look at him out there. It's impressive. I wish I had a table like that. Let's see. You'll be hearing more from the students about this. Talking to Phil, one thing he does is he writes an inordinate number of letters of recommendation for graduating students and for ones who have graduated and are changing jobs. And I've noticed him do that a lot over the years. He was also Associate Dean for the Graduate School for 2 years. Okay? Other couple things, these are things that people don't know about. Is Tom Engr here? There's Tom Engr. Phil Schmidt and Tom Engr and Tom Courtney, back in, I don't know what year it was, but it was in the 70s, decided to organize the Equal Opportunity in Engineering. I don't think they called it that at the time, but effectively what is now the Equal Opportunity in Engineering for minority students was started as a result of Phil and the two Toms. And so I think that was probably a little bit as a result of Phil. Well, Phil's always had a bent for that, and him being at Prairie View A&M, I sure had some effect on that. As far as the curriculum, I don't think the department has a more stalwart advocate for working on the curriculum and trying to make the curriculum the very best it can be for students. And one of these is Proceed, which is which he started about a little over 10 years ago, which is actually pervaded largely through our curriculum now, and a lot of courses actually use the Proceed approach. Finally, actually on a more personal note, the Schmidt and Vliet family have been very close, and for example, we've done scouting trips to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I think Alan is here, and Danny, and also to Philmont with Phil's son Alan, and we've been at many Donna Schmidt's dinners at her house, right, Donna? If anybody likes good food, boy, okay. The other thing that was a regular for a while, until we all had grandchildren and we go off in other places, is the Schmidt-Vliet, I call it the Schmidt-Vliet family ensemble at the Vliet's Christmas morning party. It's basically, I think there's percussion, there's a saxophone, and Phil either on the piano or the accordion, and our kids on stuff, and that was always a regular event. The other thing is, Phil is a couple of things that you can get Phil really interested in is accordions and astronomy. And so at our place up at we have a place at Tahoe, and Phil and Donna have come up on several occasions, and he's led 4 star and moon gazing parties at our house, which really went over great. And we appreciate for that. So accordions and astronomy, the 2 A's. Anyway, Phil and Donna have been wonderful friends, and finally, I personally feel I've been very fortunate to come to the University of Texas, and for the great colleagues I've had here, and Phil has been one of the best. And I think some of his zeal has probably rubbed off on some of the rest of us. Thank you.